Madison had been feeling different for a while. She couldn't exactly describe it, not sadness, not emptiness, just a quiet, constant heaviness. It wasn't dramatic, didn't come with crying spells or long nights staring at the ceiling. Instead, it was the absence of something. Of laughter, of ease, of connection. She still loved her husband, Ryan. Their marriage was strong in all the ways people hope for. He was kind, supportive, and never made her feel small. But even love can't always stop someone from slipping into their own silent world. And that's what had happened to Madison. It started after her younger sister passed away 3 years ago. Since then, something inside her had slowly turned off. She still went to work, still hosted family dinners, still smiled in photos. But behind it all, there was a quiet fog. And even though Ryan tried his best to keep their life full, Madison often felt like she was just going through the motions. Ryan noticed. He wasn't loud about it, but he saw it in the way she stopped. Playing music while cooking, how she stopped asking to go out on weekends, and how she rarely laughed at his jokes anymore. He knew she wasn't angry or distant on purpose. She was simply tired of pretending to be okay. Tired of missing something that used to make her feel alive. Then one Wednesday morning, as Madison poured herself a cup of coffee, Ryan gently asked her a question she didn't expect. "What would make you feel alive again?" She blinked, surprised. "I don't know. I really don't." He didn't push, he just nodded. And the conversation ended there. But 2 weeks later, something happened that would completely shift everything. It was a rainy Friday. Madison had left work early because the power went out in the building. She was looking forward to a quiet evening, maybe reading a book, wrapping herself in a blanket, and waiting for Ryan to get home. When she turned onto their street, she noticed a few cars parked near the house. At first, she assumed it was a neighbor having guests over. But as she got closer, she realized those cars were parked right outside her own driveway, confused. She pulled in and parked beside them. The porch light was on. The curtains were closed. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the wet pavement, umbrella in hand, unsure of what she was about to walk into. The moment she opened the front door, warmth hit her, not just from the air inside, but from the energy in the room. Laughter, voices, movement. She paused at the entrance. Eyes scanning the living room. There were 5 people standing and chatting like they belonged there. And in the middle of them stood Ryan, smiling like he'd been waiting for her all day. "Hey, honey," he said, walking toward her. "Don't be mad. I invited some friends." Madison was stunned. "Friends?" He nodded and motioned to the group. "From college, you've heard about them, but you've never met. They're here for the weekend." She looked around. Faces she didn't know. Voices she hadn't heard before. And yet something about the room didn't feel threatening. It felt intentional. "I don't understand," she said, gently setting her purse down. Ryan took her hand. "I know you've been feeling distant. I've been trying everything I can think of. And I just thought maybe the answer isn't in doing something small. Maybe it's in shaking things up a bit." She looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You invited 5 people to our house to help me feel better." He smiled, nervous now. "Yes. Not to fix anything, it's just to bring life back into the room." Just then, one of the women stepped forward. She had kind eyes and a soft voice. "Hi, I'm Grace. Ryan's told us a lot about you. We're just here to hang out. No pressure." Then came Ethan, a tall, calm guy with a gentle presence. Then Jordan, always cracking jokes. Melissa, kind and quick to listen. And Tom, quiet but observant. Each one greeted Madison like they had known her for years. She stood in the center of the room, unsure of what to say. This was supposed to be her safe space, her quiet escape. And now it was filled with people, energy, conversation. She looked at Ryan. He wasn't smiling out of pride. He was hopeful but also nervous. He wasn't sure this would work. He just wanted her to feel something again. And, strangely, she did. Not joy, not relief, but curiosity. She sat down, still cautious, but open. That night, the house came alive in a way it hadn't in a long time. They cooked dinner together, laughed over stories from Ryan's college days, and played a simple board game that somehow stretched on for hours. Madison didn't feel the pressure to perform. No one asked her personal questions. They just let her be Dot. At one point, Grace turned to her and said, "Ryan talks about you like you saved him. He said you're the calm in every storm." Madison smiled softly. "I don't feel very calm these days." Grace nodded. "Then maybe it's your turn to let someone else be that for you." It was a small thing to say, but it stuck. As the evening went on, Madison watched Ryan with his friends. She had never seen this side of him, the way he relaxed. The way his eyes lit up when Tom told a joke, how he listened so closely when Melissa talked about her recent move. He wasn't trying to entertain her, he was being himself. And she realized that, maybe in seeing him like this, she could also find a part of herself she'd buried by the time she went to bed. She was exhausted, not from sadness, but from being awake. Emotionally awake for the first time in a while. As she lay down beside Ryan, she whispered, "Thank you for today." He smiled in the dark. "It's only the beginning." Madison didn't know what the weekend would bring. She still had questions, still felt hesitant. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel alone in the room. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Madison woke up the next morning before the sun. The house was still quiet, except for the soft murmur of the rain tapping gently against the windows. For a moment, she wondered if the night before had been a dream. The voices, the laughter, the sudden appearance of 5 strangers in her living room. But when she walked downstairs, there was Grace in the kitchen, already making coffee like she'd lived there for years. Grace looked up and smiled warmly. "Morning. Hope I didn't wake you." Madison shook her head, her robe wrapped tightly around her. "No, I'm just not used to people being up before me in my own house." Grace laughed softly. "Old habit from living with too many roommates. I get up early to have a few quiet minutes before the chaos." Madison liked that. She poured herself a cup and sat at the small breakfast table. Still unsure of how to act around someone who, just 12 hours ago, was a complete stranger but who somehow didn't feel like one anymore. One by one, the others came downstairs. Ethan in sweatpants and a hoodie, Tom with a book tucked under his arm, Melissa already making scrambled eggs, and Jordan joking loudly about how hard it was to find the bathroom. It should have felt overwhelming, but strangely, it didn't. Madison watched them all move through her home as if they belonged, like the house itself had been waiting for this kind of energy again. Ryan joined last, rubbing his eyes and looking both proud and nervous. Madison caught his glance, and for a moment, they shared something unspoken. This was working. Even if they didn't fully understand why breakfast turned into a long conversation about old road trips, favorite songs, awkward college memories. Ryan's friends didn't try to include Madison in every word, but when she spoke, they listened, really listened. She wasn't treated like the wife of their friend. She was treated like part of the group. After breakfast, Melissa asked if Madison wanted to go for a walk. "Just you and me," she said with a smile. "Girl time?" Madison hesitated. "Sure, that sounds nice." They walked around the neighborhood with jackets pulled tight against the chilly air. Melissa asked nothing too deep, no questions about grief, about marriage, or how Madison was really doing. Instead, they talked about books, old movies, and how much Madison missed baking. It had once been her escape, but she hadn't touched a mixing bowl in over a year. "I don't know," Madison admitted. "I just stopped enjoying the things that used to bring me peace." Melissa didn't offer advice. She just nodded. Sometimes peace looks different when you're hurting. That's okay. That afternoon, Madison found herself in the kitchen with Grace, laughing over a recipe for cinnamon rolls that neither of them really remembered how to make. Ethan offered to be the taste tester. Jordan played music on his phone. Tom quietly did the dishes without being asked, and Ryan. He stayed in the background watching it all unfold. He wasn't trying to control the moment or direct it. He simply gave Madison space to be herself again, Not the version that smiled because she had to, but the version who smiled because something inside her was warming up again. That night, they ordered takeout, pushed all the furniture to the side, and played charades in the living room. Madison hadn't laughed that hard in years, so much so that she had to wipe tears from her eyes. It was somewhere between Ethan's terrible attempt at acting out a giraffe and Tom's deadpan jokes that Madison felt something shift. She wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't hosting guests. She wasn't forcing conversation. She was present and real. And, for the first time in so long, open. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Madison and Ryan sat outside under the soft string lights he had put up in the backyard. The air was cold, but neither of them seemed to mind. "I don't know what's happening," Madison said, her voice quiet. Ryan looked over. "Is that a bad thing?" "No, it's just unexpected. I haven't felt this light in a while. I don't want to lose it." "You won't," he said. "It's still inside you. It always was. I just thought maybe you needed help remembering." She looked at him, her heart suddenly full. "You brought 5 people into our house to help me remember who I am." "I'd bring 100 if that's what it took," he said without hesitation. Madison reached for his hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ryan didn't say anything, but the way he squeezed her hand said enough. Inside, the house had quieted down, but the warmth hadn't left. There were empty plates in the sink, blankets on the couch, and the scent of cinnamon still in the air. It looked lived in, alive, like a home again, and Madison, for the first time in a long while, felt like she belonged inside it. The final morning arrived with a quiet stillness. Sunlight streamed in through the curtains, softer than usual, as if it, too, knew this was the last day. Madison lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how different the house felt now, warmer, lighter, louder, and somehow more hers again. She heard voices downstairs, low, friendly. The kind of morning chatter that meant that coffee was brewing and breakfast was on the way. Normally, she would have pulled the blanket over her head and waited for the noise to pass. But this morning, she got up, willingly. She walked down the stairs barefoot, her hair a little messy, but she didn't care. In the kitchen, Grace was slicing fruit, Ethan was flipping pancakes, and Jordan was, as always, cracking jokes about everything and nothing. Ryan turned and smiled when he saw her. "Morning," he said. Just that one word, but it was full of meaning. "Morning like a beginning." "Morning," she said back. They ate breakfast around the table like a family. The kind of breakfast where no one checked their phones and no one talked about what time they had to leave. Everyone knew the weekend was ending. No one wanted to rush the goodbye. After breakfast, Ryan pulled Madison aside and asked, "Do you want to go for a walk?" "Just us." She nodded, slipping on a light jacket. The fall air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under their feet as they walked through the quiet neighborhood. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Madison said, "I forgot how good it feels to be part of something." Ryan looked at her, waiting. "I didn't just lose my sister, Ryan," she said. "I lost the feeling that life could still be full. Like there were still new people to meet, new stories to hear, laughter waiting around corners I hadn't turned yet." Ryan took her hand. "And now, I'm starting to believe again," she said. "I didn't know how much I needed that until this weekend." They walked a little further before sitting down on a bench near the small lake at the edge of the neighborhood. Ducks floated on the surface, and a breeze picked up just enough to make her lean a little closer to him. "I was scared," Ryan admitted. "I thought maybe you were slipping away. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't reach you." "You reached me," she said quietly. "Not with words, but with people. With warmth. With this." Back at the house, the group began packing up. Suitcases lined the hallway, jackets were slung over chairs, and leftover snacks were divided into plastic containers. Madison moved through the house, helping where she could, but mostly just watching, taking it all in. Grace hugged her first. "You're stronger than you think, you know?" Madison smiled, tears forming. "You've helped me remember that." One by one, they said goodbye. Jordan with a dramatic bow, Melissa with a soft kiss on the cheek, Ethan with a comforting squeeze of the shoulder, and Tom with a quiet nod that meant more than words. And then they were gone. The house was still again, but not empty. It held the weekend like a memory in its walls. And Madison felt it in her chest, like something had cracked open and let the light in. She turned to Ryan, who was standing by the window, watching the last car pull away. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. He walked over and took her hands. "You don't have to. Just don't disappear again." "I won't," she said. "But we need to keep this going. Not the house full of people, part just. The connection. The trying. The living." He nodded. "We will. Together." In the days that followed, Madison didn't go back to being the old version of herself. That woman was gone. But a new one began to grow, one who went for walks in the evening again, who turned on music while making dinner, who called old friends just to say hello. One Saturday morning, she signed up for a community baking class. She stood in the kitchen with 6 strangers and a bowl of flour, and for a moment, she thought about that weekend, about how strangers had walked into her house and somehow brought her back to life. Ryan picked her up after class, smiling like he had when he first fell in love with her. "How was it?" Madison laughed, holding up a slightly burned cinnamon roll. "Deliciously average." He laughed too. "Let's go home." Home, the word had changed. It was no longer a quiet place where she disappeared. It was where she returned to, where she grew, where she healed. Months passed. Seasons changed. But the memory of that weekend stayed fresh. Not because of the pancakes or the charades, or even the people themselves, but because of what it reminded her, that sometimes healing doesn't look like therapy sessions or long talks. Sometimes it looks like opening the door and letting new life walk in, and love, real love, since always in grand gestures. Sometimes it's in 5 unexpected guests, a few cups of coffee, and someone who refuses to let go of you, even when you've let go of yourself. Madison would never forget the moment she walked into her home and found 5 strangers smiling back at her, because that was the moment her story started again.